get to the title of the talk then. So the title of the talk is, what does putting the attention in the I am mean, and how is it related to non-duality? Okay. So first of all, like always, I am going to talk about what non-duality is, and then we'll go to the title. So what is non-duality? La 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 la. So non-duality to me is a seeing through the illusion of self and the illusion of this world, and an energetic shift back to something that was already there, had always been there, but was seemingly veiled. And this sometimes happens spontaneously. I think sometimes people are also born without being caught up in the illusion. But I think that's very rare. But most of the time, what happens is people seemingly go through a process through time, which they eventually realize is imagined, and they have this shift back to what they are, and there's a seeing through the illusions of this world and the illusions of this self. And it's quite an extreme thing to say the illusions of this world or the illusions of this self. So I'll just explain a little bit what I mean by that. Is that like everything you're seeing now is a projection of your brain. Actually, we don't know if it's a projection of the brain or what's happening, but like if we look at it like that, because science looks at it like that, like so the way that you're seeing colors and the way that you're seeing this supposed external reality is through the way your brain's set up. So you can't see the world like a bumblebee, or you can't see the world like a dog, and you can only see the world like a human being, and more particular, that human being that is seeing the world. So each human being will be different. A human's perspective tends to be that humans are the rule of the world, so the way we see is what is reality. But that's really an idea, a narcissistic idea of the past, which might have helped survival in some way. When you look at it, you see that life is seen through many, many different beings, and in each way that it's experienced, that is the reality for that particular being, and there isn't a fundamental reality. So the reality of a snail or a slug is so different from the reality of a chimpanzee. The experience will be completely different. And the reason that it's completely different is it's the way that our brains interpret. So something that we have as humans is we have phenomenal memories. So when we're seeing this moment, we can't detect this because it's the way our brain is working. We're seeing everything through also a veil of memory. So when you're sitting here right now, what also sort of lurks somewhere in the background is that you're sitting in a room on planet Earth, and in a particular country, you speak a particular language. So there is a narrative which is happening, which is functioning through memory. And that's not the same for, say, a bird. They're not having this phenomenal memory that's also influencing the experience. So waking up to me is seeing through the illusion. Like, so non-duality means seeing through the illusion of duality. And duality is the way in which, I suppose, this world is interpreted, and then what we have as a human, which is more so than other animals because of the way our mind works, is then an identification with duality. So an identification with, I am a subject. So Khaleesi, my dog, or a snail doesn't have that. They don't intrinsically think, I am a snail, I am a dog. They don't have language to process that, or the same memory power that we have to process that. So for them, it's just a happening, and they don't know what they are, and there's no issue with that. Yet their body responds to a name, to the idea of food, to certain objects. So the goal of non-duality is to go beyond this idea that's being projected of a separate me and an external world that is out there, and see what is beyond those ideas. And also, they're not just ideas, they're images, they're feelings, sensations. It's all coming together to create this belief in duality, this belief in the world, and the belief in a separate person and a separate society, a separate world, basically. Whereas we don't know what this world is. We don't know what life is. It's really unique, and science grapples to comprehend what's actually happening, and the more they investigate, there's more anomalies, can't say the word, that transpire, which I won't go into because I don't have the brain capacity to be able to regurgitate that type of information. But you don't need to be able to regurgitate all this information in order to see through the reality. It is what is beyond all thoughts, ideas, feelings, sensations, or you could say what is here regardless of what is appearing. And this is like the emergency exit from life. This is the freedom. This is the like, imagine it like a slide. So what is it that's beyond thoughts, feelings, sensations, ideas, or what is here when everything is changing? So the fundamental belief of the human, which everybody is mostly interested in, is that I exist as a separate entity. And this is what most people will spend their life consumed in, is this identity becoming as big as it possibly can, because the nature of everything is to grow and to expand, and so obviously that illusory entity wants to grow and expand. So what is there all the time when that person comes and goes? That might seem like, how can it ever come and go? I'm always here. But you is actually not always there, and you is like a baffling question, like what would be this you, this idea of you? So some people might say, well, it's the things I've done. I remember when I first began to question the nature of reality, I remember getting to the point, this was prior to me knowing about this subject, but I just remember as a teenager beginning to see that the way we look is not who we are. And I just got to that through, I suppose at the time I had eating disorder, and just reflecting with people about the nature of the body and the way we're perceived. And then also I had this experience where I lost weight very rapidly. Not that much weight, but I suddenly became attractive to men. It was sort of at the same age of puberty. And it was so weird because prior to that, I wasn't that, and I didn't comprehend that. And then suddenly everybody saw me differently. And I was like, but I'm still the same. And I remember this really profoundly affecting me, that I was still the same and yet people were seeing me differently. And the way people responded to me, it makes such a difference, becoming more attractive in the female realm. So that quite easily, at quite a young age, I was like, well, that's not who I am. I'm exactly the same from this perspective as I was like 2 years ago or 6 months ago. But yet the external sees me differently and treating me like I'm a different character and expecting me to behave like a different character. And so before I even got into spirituality per se, I had already realized quite fundamentally that the body and the way I looked wasn't who I am. And I think a lot of women that go through this process of eating issues and the pressure to look a certain way, they quite quickly realize how shallow and how fake that is. So on one regard, maybe people can see that, and then maybe people believe, oh, we're a soul inside the body that is more profound and deep than that. But what is the nature of this soul? Like, who is this soul you think yourself to be? Is that your behaviors? So one thing I also realized, I think maybe when I'd got into therapy by this point, is that people were not their bad behaviors. That was quite a fundamental realization. Like, so, you know, I remember judging people by their bad behaviors, you know, if they were a sociopath or a murderer or something, or even if somebody had a bad temper that flared up like once a week. I remember realizing that that's not who they are. That is a part currently of who they are because of particular conditions, but that isn't fundamentally who they are. So I was like, yeah, okay. So that's, and knowing that, like really knowing that deep down, like especially having a close family member that used to have anger tantrums, like really realizing that they weren't that person. There was anger that came up, but they weren't that person. So are our behaviors, are our bad behaviors who we are? Some people get stuck in guilt and shame, believing that our bad behaviors are who we are. But normally bad behaviors are circumstantial. You know, they've arisen, just like if you've ever trained a dog, they've arisen out of particular circumstances. And some of them can be fixed and some of them can't. So if you're on the narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic spectrum, it's very rare that they will change, because the part of what's flourished in them is the belief that there's nothing wrong with them and everybody else wrong with everyone else. So they won't go for therapy or they won't try to change. But that doesn't exclude the point, except I think it's sociopaths. I think psychopaths and narcissistic people, we tend to, therapy psychologists tend to think are made. So it's circumstantial. So, and then if we look at psychology, so as you begin to go down the psychology route, which I'm sure a lot of my audience have done, there is a lot of research on attachment theory, the first 5 years of life, of the importance of having secure attachments and the importance that that has later on in life in the way that you deal with stress, in the way that you deal with relationships, in the way that you deal with your job, the things that you can cope with and can't cope with. So we also know most people, it's becoming more prominent in society, and it's particularly a lot of people that are into this subject, that dependent on your main caregivers for the first 5 years of your life will also determine a lot of your current behaviors, including what you will have picked to do job, your friends that you will have picked, the way you relate with people, so the way that you communicate, unless you begin to have therapy, and that will change. So that's very interesting as well, because that also doesn't imply a soul that's inside the body. It implies behavior that's being conditioned through society and through primary caregivers. So that includes, so attachment theory includes job, so includes what you choose to do as well. Yeah, it looks at all areas of life. Then you've got trauma and PTSD that have happened in childhood. So if there's been trauma or PTSD, that will also affect the person. So what is left if we take out the therapy, we take out the body? So then there's some form of sense, okay, I'm the senses. I am my feeling of the air, I'm the feeling of my sound. That's a bit weird to say. The way in which I hear. Or intelligence, maybe I'm in the intelligence. So intelligence, I think there's confusion about it, but I think it's partly to do with interaction in early years, but it's also genetic. So is that something that you are if you've inherited particular skills and traits? People like that one. Yes, that's definitely fundamentally who I am. I mean, this is for you to question. I'm just bringing it up for you to reflect on. So that wealth, what about wealth? Well, I'm definitely the money that my family have inherited and accumulated. Society disagrees in a lot of Western societies now, bar maybe America. There is big inheritance tax because our society disagrees that if your parents are wealthy, then the next generation should be wealthy, and there's a lot of battle over that. So at the moment, a lot of inheritance tax is 40%, I think. So you're not your wealth. Are you your titles? Some countries believe that, some countries don't. I think England is monarchy, so England believes in that you inherit being a duke, or you inherit being a prince, or you inherit being an earl. That's so funny, eh? I inherit being an earl. Earl Grey, please. That would just be brilliant if somebody was an earl and they decided to name their child Grey. Hello, Earl Grey. Only in England that would work. So yeah, so all of these things, like what is this soul that we believe in, tend to believe in as Christians? So there is a soul inside the body, and the soul either does good actions or bad actions, and if it does good actions it's closer to Jesus, and it does bad actions it's closer to the devil. If it does good it goes to heaven, if it does bad it goes to hell and burns in flames for eternity. Very interesting concept that we have in the West. Yeah, what is that? What is left? And then this is the most fantastic bit. So after I've been negating, we then go to the positive. So what is left is there is this empty looking and this consciousness. And this empty looking and the consciousness aren't separate from this moment. So everything else comes and goes. So your Earl Grey title, your money, your behaviors, everything else, your body comes and goes. But this moment, not the pictures, not the scenery in this moment, but this moment and this sense of aliveness, of being, of empty looking, of, you could call it light if you want to get all romantic about it, never leaves. And that's fundamentally in everything, all things. All things and no things. Isn't that stupendous? No, I can't say the word. Splendid. Ah! Superfluous? No, I can't say it. So everywhere you go is this beingness, this aliveness. So I tend to split it up in saying consciousness and the I am, but they're not separate. There's so many different ways in which you can teach it, and I'm happy to look at those different ways, but it's just teaching, again, is illusion. It's what this teaching is trying to point to is something beyond the intellect. It's like really going beyond the illusions in this reality, the illusion of the brain. We don't know for sure if this is beyond the illusion of the brain. We can't say for sure yes one way or the other, but it's certainly the base of experiencing, and there can be this energetic shift to being identified with the person to identifying with what I would call the absolute. But I can't say to you for sure that this isn't, again, projections of the brain, because we can't ever step outside of what we are and look at it. So I can't, like when you wake up, you can't then like step outside of beingness and consciousness and I amness and look at it from the outside and name what it is. Maybe that happens in death, we don't know. But in this reality, it's the closest thing, I would say, coming to God, to oneness, to non-duality. And to me, I call it the end of suffering, because it's a shift from being just the person to the person arising in something fundamentally that you are. So it's like a different way of experiencing. Instead of just experiencing through this separate person, there is experiencing through this expansiveness in which that person arises and dissipates. And I feel like this is maybe the more peaceful way in which humans should be living. I mean, saying that's a little bit contradictory, because they're living exactly what they're living, so it couldn't be any other way. But I'm just saying that it might be a more peaceful way for humans. Like at the moment, I feel like a lot of humans are suffering and not happy in their lives. It's like a reset. It's like this reset that is in all things. It's right here, right now. Okay, so let's go back to the title of the talk. What does putting the attention in the I am mean, and how to relate to non-duality? So over the years, I've been very reluctant to give a prescription, even though I have. But I wouldn't say that it's something that I'm repetitively saying to people, but I've just changed lately and decided to give people a prescription. So a very traditional prescription is to put the attention into the I am. So this is what Nisargadatta Maharaj did for 3 years and then woke up. He just kept putting the attention back in the I am. And basically, to me, what the I am is a presence, is this alive presence that's happening. And it's got a feeling of love to it. But the I am actually isn't separate from the empty looking, it's presence. It's like, they're kind of the same thing. And you could say the I am is maybe more connected to the heart or to love. So some people say it's like the first thing that comes into the existence is the I am. So it's like, yeah, like a love. And in this prescription, I give it saying that it really ultimately isn't a prescription. It's actually a description of something that can happen. So I'm saying it, I'm instructing to do this and to let the magic arise. But I'm also saying it's a description of something that can happen. Because who is this I that is doing that? And then when you really investigate yourself, you see that choice is also another idea that's appearing in this, that's being projected by this phenomenal body, mind, brain, and it's not actually the reality of it. Like the scientists say that a choice is made, and then 6 seconds after that choice is made, then a conscious thought comes up to make that choice. It's this really beyond what we're telling ourselves and what we're narrating ourselves. And what the practice is it's like, so you see a story. So say if you're in the kitchen and your partner is really messy and you feel annoyed by that. You have total right to feel annoyed. I'm not saying do or don't feel annoyed. Like, you get a lot of teachers that are like, it's about getting rid of annoyance. To me, it's not about getting rid of annoyance. It's about getting rid of all the fluff that's around the annoyance. So there is annoyance, and the annoyance might then have lots of stories on it. Fundamentally, it is a feeling maybe in the solar plexus of having your boundaries crossed, because when we are social animals, there needs to be consideration and respect of the other. So if the other is like really messy and not being considerate, then it's a boundary cross. So it most probably naturally comes with an anger. So when boundaries are crossed, we normally naturally have anger. But then it gets out of control because the mind and the thinking mind latch onto it and start telling itself all types of false beliefs. How dare he? Who does he think he is? He's done it again. He doesn't respect me. All these narratives. Whereas fundamentally, the feeling of it is a feeling of anger, most probably in the solar plexus, and maybe a wanting to express that you're hurt to your partner. But what happens is the mind goes into all these stories about it. So I'm not talking about ignoring the feeling or bypassing the feeling. I'm talking about the noticing of that, then putting the attention back in presence, back in the I am, and allowing that feeling of annoyance to be there. And ideally what you want to do is then be able to communicate, not all the time, like, I mean, it depends, but you ideally want to be able to communicate that with your partner. Maybe you don't have to do it while you're having the feeling of annoyance. Maybe you can do it when the annoyance has passed by, because sometimes when we're new to this and we communicate and there's annoyance there, then it gets carried away and an argument persists. So it's like, it's just noticing that feeling and coming and really allowing that feeling to be there in what's happening. It's not getting out of feelings. Feelings are part of this experience, just like the sunlight, just like the tree, just like other people. It's what we do. We, as humans, have feelings. Excuse me while I let in Miss Kaliti, who doesn't really want in. She wants me. So yeah, so it's like really embodying feelings. What's happened for most people is that they've begun to become walking brains. So they have that experience and they don't really know what their body's feeling. They only really know what's happening up here, and so they just know the story that they're telling about the poor them that has such a shit life or shit partner or all these different things, and they're not really feeling their feeling. They're just going off into stories and conceptual thoughts about it, and it kind of like is really dense, seeking character energy. Like it's hard separation, and there's a belief in you and a belief in this world, and there's not the connection to the mystery and to the beauty of what you are. Yeah, it's like they're only seeing their conceptual reality. What they might also be able to do is they might be able to just go into the empty looking, but this is still bypassing, because the empty looking in a way is like the spaciousness, which is more up here as well. So they're again not connected to the feeling, so they're bypassing the feeling. A lot of spiritual people think that if they've had the feeling, then there's something wrong with them. Whereas I think if you're feeling the feeling, there is something right with you. So this is really about embodiment, and a big mistake in non-duality, because a lot of people think it's about getting out of it. What it's getting out of is all the excess thinking around it. Sometimes what you have to do is you have to become clear on relationships, on how to communicate. You know, if you're having lots of negative thoughts about your partner or about your family situation, and you're getting very lost in that, so the mind is like really agitated by that, you sometimes have to go into psychology to understand what's going on. I would say sometimes, I would say 99% of the time, you have to understand like what's happening to you in relationships often. Even if you don't have many relationships, it's often because they're too difficult for you, so you avoid them. So there has to be an exploration of like psychology, and Western psychology is great for behavioral science and how we interact, and like we've got and family systems. It's really amazing. So on my reference page, there is this gentleman that's on there called Dr. Kirk Honda, and he's a relationship therapist, and he has an amazing YouTube channel which looks at reality TV to depict and explain healthy relationships. It's actually really super cool. But even better than that, if you subscribe, you can go into his deep dives on his website, and he has like all these lectures that he gives at university and to therapists that he's been training, and it's just really great because his speciality is relationship therapist. And basically, when you can understand what's happening to you and why you're getting so chaotic in relating, then you can pull yourself into the I am more easily. When you're really lost in it, so say somebody that's really identified, and identification comes and goes, so say identification becomes really strong, so you go into the kitchen and it's really messy, and you don't know how to communicate that to your partner, and there's been lots of arguments about that with your partner. You know, like there could be so many wounds that's going on there, it can drive you into madness. Like, so you get yourself really wound up because it could be related to childhood, it could be related to being ignored in childhood, being not listened to, being invisible, all these different feelings. And if you're completely unconscious of what's going on in the body, all these feelings are firing off without you knowing. And what you're knowing and perceiving is the stories, and the stories will be defensive. So they'll most probably be either blaming the other, blaming yourself, blaming life, blaming God, hating, shame, discomfort. No wonder humans suffer so much, and this is just normal for most people. So understanding psychology, it helps with the relationship. So I always think it's like, it's a nice thing to do for your neighbors, like you're cleaning your lawn, like, so you're making yourself like a better member of society. But also what it does for the spiritual path, like for putting the attention back in the I am, is it allows you to see when you're drifting off into craziness of the mind, into like lots of seeking patterns and lots of discomfort. And so you can see that and be like, hang on, I know this is a story of the past. And then going back to the I am. Yeah. And when it's really strong, you know, when you've realized that, you can also do emotional release techniques where you go in, you allow the feeling to speak, where you shift it from negative to positive to negative. This is also good exercises. There's so many different things you can do. I have a reference page with lots of different suggestions. I keep meaning I've got so many to add more, but it's time. I'm so immersed in writing a book at the moment that it's yeah, everything else is second. I'm just so happy that I get to do these Sundays. Yes. But at the same time, there has to be a recognition that it is a practice, and you can't really, the person can't really put itself in the I am, because the person arises in the I am and arises in the empty looking, and the person is kind of a movement in time. So the person never really exists here. It's always imagination in the past or the imagination of the future. It's not really something here in this moment that exists. So in the practice, you have to see the practice is simply about calming down the person and allowing space for the magic to arise. So it's also this story, this narrative of like, I am going to get enlightened from doing this, is an illusory story, because it's also got to be seen through as who is this I. But that doesn't mean don't do it, because my experience now of working with people is that it seems to be fundamental for most people on the path to settle down their personhood. That needs to be done. Yeah. Okay.